Welcome to the Disrupting Obesity podcast. I'm Charlotte Skanes, and I'll be sharing ways to regain control over your body and lose an extreme amount of weight naturally. Being fat is about so much more than just the food. It's about your relationship with food. That means that dealing with your weight is about more than just the food, too. You have to change that relationship. You have to start disrupting obesity. Welcome to our second part in a three-part series of Ask Whatever Intermittent Fasting. I'm taking all of the questions that you guys have sent in, well, almost all of the questions that you guys have sent in. I took over 100 of them, and I've sorted that list out. I put it into two piles, the normal questions and the Gladys questions. And for the first time ever, we're going to let the Gladyses outnumber the normals. I answered a bunch of these last week. It wasn't the easiest episode I've ever done, but we're going to take it on again today, and we're just going to dive right back in with more questions about intermittent fasting. So our first one today was, what's your opinion on combining intermittent fasting with other strategies and diets like keto or low carb? My opinion typically with the low carb, the keto, the carnivore strategies are they're not necessary, and I don't see the reason to deprive yourself of things that your body needs and that you emotionally need to feel satisfied overall. So I don't think there's any need to restrict your carbohydrates unless you have a medical condition that means that you need to restrict your carbohydrates or do keto. I mean, if you are a child with a seizure disorder, then keto might very well be the way to go for you because that's why that diet was invented. But ordinarily speaking, you can combine intermittent fasting with just about anything. It's just about narrowing the window down, right? But you certainly don't need to. The only thing you need to do when you're intermittent fasting, if you want to lose weight, is be in a calorie deficit. And that's the same as every other diet, strategy, surgery, shot, pill, you name it. They all work because they put you into a calorie deficit. So you absolutely don't need to combine intermittent fasting with keto or low carb or carnivore or paleo or any of them. You can just do normal intermittent fasting and keep yourself in a calorie deficit. If you're doing something like low carb or keto, for whatever reason, you can absolutely combine that with intermittent fasting. But just know that the only thing you need to do to make intermittent fasting or any diet work, including low carb and keto, is get yourself into a calorie deficit. That's it. Do I need to eat specific types of foods during my eating window to maximize my results? No. You can lose weight eating nothing but bacon and bubblegum. So long as you're in a deficit, it doesn't matter. Same principle applies regardless of what you're doing, and intermittent fasting is no different. So you can eat whatever you want during your eating window. That's totally fine. I certainly did. So long as you're in a deficit, you will lose weight. If you're not in a deficit, you won't lose weight. If you're looking to, you were very clear, you said maximize your results. And I'm assuming that the result that you're looking for is weight loss because that's what I do. But you can maximize things like your overall satisfaction by learning your body and learning which foods leave you feeling the most satisfied physically and emotionally. So there are different ways that I can come at that and answer this, but I'm pretty sure that by result, you mean weight loss. So no, to maximize your weight loss, there's no specific food. You just need to be in a calorie deficit. That's it. If you're looking to maximize your satisfaction over the day so that you feel less hungry during your eating window, your best bet is to make sure that you're getting enough protein, make sure that you're eating a well-balanced diet, and just keep moving things around until you figure out where you feel the most satisfied over the course of your intermittent fasting window. And specifically in your eating window. Maybe you feel better if you eat a whole bunch of calories at the beginning of that window or in the middle or at the end. We talked about this a little bit last week. So it's learning to move those calories so that you can maximize. For me, you want to maximize how good you feel while you're doing this. Because if you're feeling desperate all the time, it's probably not going to be sustainable. So I'm more interested in maximizing your satisfaction so that you can keep going as opposed to just maximizing your weight loss as quickly as possible, because that's really not what it's all about. How can I make intermittent fasting work with a busy schedule or social events? Well, you can move your window a little bit to fit in particular days. I certainly did that. The example I used last week was going to Christmas dinner at my grandparents' house. just because my eating window didn't open until 6 o'clock at night, I wasn't going to sit there at noon and not eat. So on those days, I would shift my window. So instead of eating for the 8 hours between 6 p.m. and 2 a.m., I would then, if we're eating a noon meal, I would probably shift my window from 12 to 8 that day. That's one way to do it. Or I would just keep going and make sure that I was in a deficit overall, because it's not, the window itself isn't the key piece here. The key piece to weight loss is always your calorie deficit. So I understand that when your schedule is moving, you might need to move your windows around on those days. Like if you're working swing shifts, for example, and you're, 3 days of the week you're on days and 3 days of the week or 2 days of the week you're on nights, however that works, you might have to be a little bit more flexible with your window. Don't be too hung up on the structure, and don't start beating yourself up or feeling bad if you have to move that eating or fasting window around. There's nothing wrong with that. It's the deficit that's key here, not the window. It's the deficit that matters. You can eat in a picture perfect window all the time. I only ever eat between these magical hours, and that's awesome. But if you're eating in a calorie surplus, you're going to gain weight. So it's not, focus less on the time frame and more on the calories on those days. And I think that'll be probably the most helpful way to look at it. What happens if I break my fast early? Does it ruin the benefits for that day? No, because the only benefits of intermittent fasting is getting into a calorie deficit. That's the benefit. So on the days where you're breaking your fast early, that's cool. So long as you stay in a calorie deficit for the rest of that day, you're going to be totally fine. There's no magic or something that happens that's transformational in your body just because you're eating between set windows. And I know that people think that it's the consistency sometimes of intermittent fasting that leads to weight loss. It's not the consistency of the fasting windows or the eating windows. It's the consistency of the calorie deficit that leads to weight loss. So that's the part that you need to worry about, and you can just let the rest of it go, especially if it's getting in your way. How do I transition into intermittent fasting without feeling overwhelmed or deprived? Gradually. The same way that you would transition down to eating 500 calories less than your TDEE, you're going to do the same thing with intermittent fasting. And we talked about this a little bit last week too, how you set that up. So the first thing I would do is figure out what your eating window looks like now. How many hours a day do you spend where you could eat? I don't mean like timing yourself, how long it takes you. Oh, I spent 22 minutes eating dinner and then I spent 15 minutes eating this. No, that's not what I mean. I mean, how long is food available to you? So if you normally have your breakfast at 7 o'clock in the morning, you don't eat until noon. That's fine. But the window's still opened because you took in calories at breakfast, right? So the fasting window would start as soon as you start taking in calories, and then it ends when you decide that you're going to stop eating. So for a lot of us now, what our eating window looks like is I have something pretty quickly after I get up, and then I can eat at any point during the day that I want until I go to sleep. So it's not uncommon now for people to have a 16-hour eating window. That happens. So if that's the case for you and you're sitting with a 16-hour window during which you eat, and then you have 8 hours a day where you're sleeping or just, not eating, but all in a row, those are the hours that we want to make the 8-hour period longer and the 16-hour period shorter. So I would start by shaving a half hour off each end. For some people, it makes more sense to shave an hour off either the front end or the back end. Most people, I think, take it off the nighttime part. So instead of stopping eating at 10 p.m., for example, they would stop eating at 9 p.m. And a lot of people find that easier. I'm the opposite because I'm a night eater. I'm always going to prefer to shave the time off the beginning of the day. Sometimes just taking a half hour off each end. And then we're just going to gradually narrow that window until it's smaller. And ideally, you want your eating window to be shorter than your fasting window. That's, I think, 14, 15-hour fasts for women are generally, I think, what's recommended. I don't have a recommendation. You need to find what works best for you and your body. So if you're looking at a 16-8 right now, that's cool. Let's try to get you to a 15-9. And then maybe you can get down to a 14-10. And just keep narrowing it slowly and gradually. That's how you do it without feeling overwhelmed or deprived. What's a realistic starting schedule for someone new to fasting? Maybe I should have put these questions in a different order. I kind of answered this one already. A realistic starting schedule for someone who is just getting going with intermittent fasting is like what I just described. You want to become aware of what you're doing right now. So for a week, maybe 2 weeks, depending on how much fluctuation you see in your day, just make note of, I broke my fast this morning at 8 a.m. and I had my last thing to eat at 10 p.m. Okay, cool. Just keep track of where you're at. And then once you have an idea, an average of how many hours you're eating each day, how big that eating window is, then what you're going to want to do is just start shaving it down. Shaving it down, and you'd like to hit the point where the number on the left is bigger than the number on the right. So your eating window is smaller than your fasting window. That's generally ideal, but I would just start really gradually tapering it in. I think that's the most realistic way to get started. I think it's really bad advice to tell people to just, wake up tomorrow and only eat between the hours of 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. I don't think throwing people into the deep end of the pool is very helpful. I would make the changes incrementally, and I would make them gradually. That's how I'd go about it. Can I fast on some days and not on others, or does it need to be consistent to see results? This depends on how you look at it. There are intermittent fasting plans out there where you're like on for 5 days of the week that you eat, and then 2 days of the week you don't. And some where you eat for 2 days and then you don't eat for a day and then you eat for two more days. Not really my jam. We need to be eating every single day. I think it's a bad idea to try and fast for a full day. But I realize that that's not what you're asking. I think you're asking if you have a fasting window, say you only eat during a 10-hour period, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, but then the other days of the week, you just eat whenever you want. Ultimately, it doesn't matter so long as you're in a calorie deficit. Your eating window can be whatever you want. The point of intermittent fasting is to make it easier to get into that deficit because you're eliminating time of the day that you would normally spend eating. So it's entirely up to you. Consistency is key, but the only part of this you need to be consistent with is your calorie deficit. That's king. That's the most important thing going. So my answer, I guess, is no. Well, no, I guess the answer is yes, because you asked, can I fast on some days and not on others? Yeah, you can. You don't have to quote unquote fast at all. I mean, we all are fasting anyway because nobody eats 24 hours a day. We all intermittent fast at some point. Yeah, the only part you need to be consistent with is your calorie deficit though. The rest of it, you can let it go. Don't spend time beating yourself up because Tuesday you made a mistake with your window. Let it go. So long as you were in a deficit, doesn't matter. How do I handle fasting when I'm traveling or on holiday? Well, you have a choice to make. You can either move your window around to accommodate those meals on holiday. You can let your fasting windows go and just focus on your deficit. That might be the easiest thing for you to do. It's an individual choice, though. My choice would probably be to move my window so that because I don't want to be eating uncontrollably all day long. That's a bad old pattern for me, and it's not something that I want to fall into. So I'm probably not going to just say fuck it and let my fasting and eating windows just completely disappear. What I will do though is shift that eating window so that, say I'm on holiday and there's breakfast every day included, I'm going to want to partake in that breakfast. So I'm going to. That's what's going to happen. But what I will do is keep myself in that calorie deficit because, again, that is the only part that matters. You also have the choice of sticking with your fasting, and that can be a super empowering choice too. You can say, no, I don't want to have the breakfast, even though it's included, because I don't start eating until noon. And there's nothing wrong with doing that and digging in, but it can lead to some interpersonal issues as well. And that is definitely not what this episode is about, how to handle the people around you when you're intermittent fasting. Although I probably should include that because it can be difficult. Not everybody's going to be on board with you, but it's your body and it's your choice how you feed it. So there is that. Are there ways to adapt fasting for someone working night shifts or with an irregular schedule? Absolutely. I chose to only eat at night when I was losing my weight, even though I wasn't on night shift. It just was what worked best for me and for my body and helped me to lose weight the most consistently. Yes, you absolutely can adapt your fasting. That eating window can be anywhere. So mine was 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. Your eating window could just as easily be 3 a.m. to noon. You can make it anytime you want. I know there's a lot of rules and there's a lot of rhetoric and chatter and stuff out there. No, you can do this your way. You can make it work for you. Find your windows now and then just start tapering them down. And if you've got an irregular schedule, perhaps what you need to say to yourself then is, okay, well, I only eat during an 11-hour window every day. Okay, cool. But on the days that I'm working X shift, I'm going to take that 11-hour window and I'm going to shift it this way. And then when I come back to my other shift, I'm going to flip it back this way. So if you want to hang on to the window, and again, the most important thing is the calorie deficit, not the window. But if you want to hang on to that window and your shift is irregular, just move the time block. You know, you eat during an 11-hour window. That's what you've decided that you're going to do. Cool. Shift it. Move it with your shifts to accommodate your schedule. I think that's the best way to go about it. Does intermittent fasting work for people who have a lot of weight to lose versus those with just a little? I know there are a lot of differences between losing a significant amount of weight versus losing a smaller amount of weight. That's something that I've talked about before, and I'm sure I'll be talking about it again in the future. When it comes to intermittent fasting, you absolutely can use intermittent fasting if you have a lot of weight to lose. I had just over 200 pounds to lose, and that was one of the tools I used to help get my weight off. The other tool I used was a calorie deficit, which isn't really a tool so much as the only way to actually lose weight. But intermittent fasting helped me to stay in my window, and it helped me to learn to hear my body and when I needed to eat and what made me feel the most satisfied and how to move those calories around. So you definitely can use intermittent fasting to help you if you have a lot of weight to lose. I think it's probably easier than a lot of the other guidance and plans that are out there right now. How can I stop feeling guilty if I break my fast earlier than I plan to? Well, you can tell yourself that it doesn't matter that you broke your fast earlier than you planned to, so long as you stay in a calorie deficit that day. It's the truth. So you're not trying to lie to yourself, because it's very hard to convince yourself of a lie sometimes. So you don't have to worry about that part of it, because you're just going to tell yourself the truth. It's okay. I broke my fast. That wasn't my goal for today, but so long as I stay in a calorie deficit, it's going to be fine. Beating yourself up for that, you can kind of fall into a bit of a self-sabotage spiral, right? Because you subconsciously know that if you beat yourself up enough, you're going to eat more and you're going to give up, which lets the part of your brain that wants you to do that, right? It makes it very happy. So I would avoid doing that. Don't kick off a guilt and shame spiral. There's no point making yourself feel worse. Okay, I broke my fast sooner than I thought I was going to. Not the choice I wanted to make today. So I'm going to pivot here and I'm going to stay focused on my calories so that I stay in a deficit today. So it's not going to matter. We're going to cancel out the fact that I broke my fast early, and we're not going to use it as an excuse to keep eating poorly all day, because that could be the self-sabotage play, right? Oh, I broke my fast. Wasn't supposed to eat for another hour. I guess I blew it today, which is like a get out of jail free card to keep eating. No. Double down, refocus, and stay in that deficit for the day. And that's a very proactive way to not feel guilty. Instead of using the guilt as a vehicle to eat more, spin it on its head and tell yourself that you're just going to stay in that deficit. What's the best way to manage emotional eating or cravings while fasting? I think it's the same way with any other type of plan that involves a calorie deficit, which needs to be all of the plans. You're going to do it with the 3A way. You've got to become aware of your emotional eating, why you're craving the foods that you are, why you're making the choices that you're making, what's driving your decisions right now. You got to acknowledge that whole process, because it's very easy to see something. Oh, look at that over there. And then turn away, bury your head in the sand, and do absolutely everything you can not to see that problem ever again. It's a lot harder to do that if you actively acknowledge what's going on. And then, of course, that's when accountability can come into play and you can actually do something about it. So managing your emotions is the hardest part of this weight loss bit, right? Because it's not about the food. It's about our relationship with food. The best way to handle cravings and emotional eating is to learn to work with it. It's to get to the bottom of the comfort, reward, and cope stuff so that you can set yourself free from all of that baggage and look at it, I guess, from a more detached perspective. I'm not sure if that makes any sense. You need to have some space, right? And when we're focusing on the food all the time, there isn't a lot of room to focus on what's driving those choices. Why are we reaching for those things? What are we actually doing in these moments? I think you're less likely to encounter a lot of really bad cravings if you're letting yourself eat the foods that you know and love, just less of them, and keeping yourself in a calorie deficit. I'm not sure that ignoring cravings is always the best way to go. Sometimes it is. Sometimes giving in only makes it worse. And sometimes not giving in only makes it worse. So you need to learn to strike a balance there too. Oh boy. Okay. It's Gladys's turn. And I just gave the first question a quick skim, and it's shades of last week. This is going to be interesting. Okay. Gladys was on the attack big time. I don't know why the intermittent fasting stuff triggers her so badly, but it really does. Intermittent fasting is just, maybe it's the fast. I don't know. I don't know if it's the intermittent part or if it's the fasting part that's so offensive. Something about it is just terribly, terribly offensive to Gladys. And yeah, I don't get it. But okay, here we go. And like the last one, I'm going to try really hard to not do voices. I'm going to try. Okay. Skipping meals. Weren't you the one who said you used to binge because you'd starve yourself all day? Hypocritical much. Okay, that's a very interesting interpretation of the way that I lost weight. At no point, I want to be very, very clear here. At no point when I lost either the 201 pounds or the 115 later, at no point in any of that process did I ever starve myself ever. I ate every single day. I think I ate pretty well. Actually, I just stayed in a calorie deficit. And I know it's upsetting because I was eating at night. And I think maybe a lot of this is triggering me. And I didn't realize this when I was doing the last episode. I took so much shit while I was losing my weight for the way I was doing it. And I was attacked like in real life. It wasn't just this random Gladys nonsense that comes in through email or DMs or whatever, or comments on a post. This was people actually getting into my face and telling me that I was crazy, that I was stupid. I had people tell me I was a liar and that I wasn't actually doing what I was actually doing. So I guess it puts me into kind of a weird headspace. So thank you for bearing with me. I'm still going to try to answer all of these. But no, I don't think it's hypocritical much. I at no point to lose my weight did I starve myself. It's just, I was eating 3,500 calories a day was my TDEE. So I was eating 3,000 calories a day in a deficit. I don't think you can argue that anyone eating 3,000 calories a day is starving themselves. And I certainly don't advocate for that. You need to be eating your TDEE, the number of calories that your body needs every day, and a moderate deficit of 200 to 500 calories a day isn't dangerous. So yeah, there was no skipping meals. I talked about this one a little bit last week too. I think that's a massive misconception when it comes to intermittent fasting. Oh, it's just skipping meals. I don't know why you call it that. All you're doing is skipping meals. I'm not skipping meals. I ate 3 square meals a day. I just ate them at night. I ate them during a time period that people don't seem to care for. So unless, if I'd been working shift work, then it would have been acceptable. But because it was a choice I was making to control my weight, suddenly that made it deeply unacceptable and profoundly offensive. And I was skipping meals and starving myself. No, I wasn't, and I'm not encouraging anybody to do that now. You don't have to skip meals if you're intermittent fasting. You can still have 3 meals. It all depends on what size window you choose and what works best for you and your body. If you're eating 16 hours a day now, what does your day look like if you're only eating 14 hours? What does it look like if you're eating 12? It's learning to answer those questions to figure out where your body's the most comfortable. That's all. Okay, I'm not sure why I included this one because I don't think there is a question. It's just a personal attack. But okay, here we go. Don't pretend you're all high and mighty. You just want to sound smarter than the diet culture you supposedly hate. Guess what? You're not. Okay. Yep. I'm not trying to sound smarter than anybody. I definitely completely hate most of diet culture at the moment. And I did that episode on diet culture in the past. And yeah, I hate that too. So I don't think it takes a lot, though, to sound smarter than someone who's encouraging people to eat tapeworms to lose weight or, swallow juice filled cotton balls. Like I don't have to work too hard to sound smarter than that. So, there's that. But yeah, I do hate diet culture very much. I don't think intermittent fasting is a part of toxic diet culture, though. It's something that we're all doing anyway. And I know that's upsetting too, but even you, Gladys, are intermittent fasting, whether you want to acknowledge it or not. So yeah, I'm not trying to be high and mighty, honey. I'm just trying to be me and trying to help out where I can. That's it. Okay, here comes some more super fun personal attacks. I don't buy it. You've already lost your weight, so of course it's easy for you to play around with fasting. What about the people who are still struggling? You don't get it anymore. So this is a criticism that I get a lot. I either get told that I'm too fat, not like currently, I'm still too fat to be advising anybody on weight loss. And the other criticism I get is I'm too thin and it was too long ago and I'm completely out of touch. And yeah, I don't get it anymore. I'm pretty sure I do. I'm pretty sure you don't forget what it feels like to lose a couple 100 pounds. I don't think you forget what that struggle's like. I still remember what it was like trying to do something as simple as tie my shoes and not get winded, but just being so big that bending over would mean I couldn't breathe. So I think I do still get it. Respectfully, I'm going to disagree with you. I'm certainly not playing around with fasting. It's something I've been doing for years. I lost all my weight that way the first time. I used intermittent fasting to maintain my weight for more than 5 years before I put 115 pounds of it back on. And then I lost all that weight with intermittent fasting as well. And I use intermittent fasting as a tool now, even now, to help keep my weight in check when I need to. So yeah, it's not something that I play around with. And I do think it's a valuable tool for people who are struggling. And I'm sorry that you're still struggling with your weight. I'd like to help if I can. It doesn't sound like I can because I think you've got your mind made up about me. But yeah, I'm sorry for the people who are still struggling. I think intermittent fasting can be a really valuable tool to help you get into and stay in that consistent calorie deficit so the weight will come off. All right, she was on a real warpath with these. And for the record, these all came in from different people. You're so full of it. First, you tell people to track calories, and now you're saying they don't need to eat for hours. Make up your mind. Well, uh, my mind's made up, and I've been very consistent about this. You just have to be in a calorie deficit. Intermittent fast, don't intermittent fast. I honestly don't give a shit, Gladys. It's a good tool to use. That's all. If you want to give it a try, give it a try. But even if you're intermittent fasting, my advice is always to track your calories because you can't lose weight unless you're in a calorie deficit. The only way to know that you're in a deficit is to know how many calories you're taking in. So I think that's very straightforward. I don't know how to make it any more straightforward than that. I've always told people to track their calories, and I've never said that just don't eat. That's never been my advice. Just get yourself in a calorie deficit, narrow down your window. And again, you don't have to if you don't want to. So long as you're in a deficit, you'll lose the weight. That's the key piece here. Why don't you just admit it? You're pushing fasting because it's trendy, not because it actually works. What's next? Weight loss gummies? Okay, so it sounds like we agree on something pretty significant here, because you sound like you're anti-weight loss gummy. I am also anti-weight loss gummy, Gladys, and I promise you, I'm never going to start selling them because they don't work. So you don't have to worry about what's coming up next in that regard. What's actually coming up next, I've got a couple more books coming out on Amazon this year. I've got a cookbook coming out. I've developed my own social media platform for my membership. So that's been the next big thing that's coming up next. I've been pushing fasting the whole time that I've been doing this. It's not a new thing for me. You might have just found me and discovered my content, but that doesn't make it new. I've been doing this for years and the messaging has always been the same. And I don't give a shit about the trends. I mean, I like to watch them. I like to comment on them. I like to see, what funny thing are we doing now? And sometimes I'm completely horrified, like the fact that tapeworms are back. And there have been a couple of other diets that I thought were gone forever that I've seen people posting about on Instagram. And I'm just like, how are we believing this shit? But anyway, yeah, no, I wouldn't, I'm not trying to push anything. I do what you want to do. And I definitely don't swing with the trends. I just like to do my own thing. So I'm not sure where Gladys was going with this one. I feel like she was projecting. Like, I really think that's what's going on. Okay, so I'll bet you love intermittent fasting just because it means less cooking. Easy to lecture people when you don't have to practice what you preach. Okay. I have 3 kids and a husband, and I have to cook a lot. And sometimes I have to cook something different for myself than I'm cooking for them. Um, I have a cookbook. I'm not a great cook, but I enjoy cooking, especially for my family. So no, I don't love intermittent fasting because it means less cooking. I'm doing almost the same amount of cooking, just during a different set of hours. That's all. We're back to the skipping meals and to the starving yourself and all of that. That's not what intermittent fasting is. You still have to eat. You still have to eat meals. So yeah, and I'm not trying to lecture anybody, and I do have to practice what I preach because if I get fat again, I will die. My system will shut down. My body won't be able to handle it. So I definitely practice what I preach, and I'm not yeah, I feel like maybe you don't like cooking. That's all I can figure out is this is just projection. That's the only answer I've got for this one. You act like fasting is some enlightened choice, but let's get real. Okay, I'll get real with you. Let's do this. It's just starving yourself in a prettier package. You know it, and I know it. No, I don't. It sounds like your mind is very definitely made up, but I can absolutely guarantee you that it is not starving yourself if you're eating your TDEE minus 500, which is all it's supposed to be, Gladys. If you had actually been paying attention, you would know that, like, when someone asks me, for example, how did you lose your weight? My answer is always two-pronged. I did it with a calorie deficit and intermittent fasting. I think those two things are hand in glove. You have to keep them together for them to work. Nothing will work if you're not in a calorie deficit. So I'm pretty consistent on this one. And this is the thing, right? Gladys already has her mind made up. By the time someone is angry enough to send me a message like that, like, there's really nothing I can say back. And the reality is, and I'm sure you guys know this, I'm not really answering these questions for Gladys. It gives me a chance to clear the mental space and get this stuff out of my head. And it gives me an opportunity to talk about things from a different angle than I would normally come at them. I didn't respond to probably 99% of these Gladys comments that come in. I just won't engage. There's absolutely no point. When someone ends a message with, you know it and I know it, there's not a lot of room for dialogue there. So I'll address it. None of this is starving yourself. I'm not trying to put anything into a prettier package. There's no gussying up calorie tracking to make it appealing to the masses. Like, no, there's just the reality of what it is. That's all. Here's another one I definitely did not respond to. You think you're helping people, but you're just confusing them. One week it's calorie tracking, the next it's fasting windows. Pick a lane already. I feel like I just dealt with this one with the last one. I did pick a lane. It's both. And if you're going to force me to pick a lane, the lane I pick is always going to be calorie tracking. Always. Because no matter what you're doing, if you're not in a deficit, you won't lose weight. And I know everybody is sick of hearing me say that. And I'm very sorry, but it's true. It sucks, but it's true. And the flip side of that coin, which is the other message I hate giving out the most, is if you think you're in a calorie deficit and you're not losing weight, you're not in a calorie deficit. I'm sorry. Yes, there are hormonal things and thyroid things that can happen that will impact that, but they're extraordinarily rare. We've been led to believe that this is happening to like every third person out there has a hormonal imbalance that isn't allowing them to lose weight. No, this is a very rare thing to have happen. So I'm definitely not trying to confuse anybody. I'm trying to help people. The reality is weight loss is confusing. I try to cut through as much of that noise as I can. The other reality is, especially when a lot of these questions are coming in from Instagram, Instagram is only showing like any one of my posts. I think it starts out only 3% of my following get to see it. And if those people don't engage with it, then Instagram just stops showing it to people. So of my 200,000 followers, that means what? 600 people? I think that's the right math. Math isn't my strong suit. Actually get to see it. So you may only have seen part of my content. I post like 3 times a day. So if you're only seeing one of those posts, I can see how maybe you would be getting a skewed view of my content. And it depends on how long you've been around. This is episode, I think, 85 of the podcast. I've had a lot to say about this stuff, and I've very clearly picked my lane. So yeah, you can sit there preaching all you want, but how about you tell us the truth? You're not fasting for health. You're doing it because you're terrified of gaining the weight back. Yeah. But my question, I got to ask you a question right back here. What's the fucking difference? Seriously, what's the difference? Yes, I am terrified of gaining my weight back for my health. I'm not terrified of gaining my weight back because I don't want my genes to fit. I'm terrified of gaining my weight back because I don't want to die. So it's for my health. So I'm not sure, like, you're talking out of both sides of your mouth here, Gladys, and you can't have it both ways. But yeah, you're right to a certain extent because my pancreas, the kidney disease, the diabetes, all of those things have impacted the way I fast, and I have shifted my eating window a bit while I'm maintaining this time, just because I have to deal with secondary diabetes. So I used to do a 16-8, an 18-6. I could really tighten that window down when I was losing my weight, but maintaining this time, I'm eating more in like a 14-10. So it's not nearly as extreme as everybody used to think it was, because I don't know why eating in an 8-hour window is extreme, but whatever. It's because of when I was doing it. And I'm not trying to preach at anybody. I'm not mandatory listening. Nobody's, broadcasting this over loudspeakers into people's homes. You can just turn me off. You don't have to listen. Flicka. Like you have free choice. And I am telling you the truth. I don't know I don't know why anybody would lie about this. I am absolutely fasting for my health. I'm confused about how you've divorced those things. Like, if you think that I'm just worried about my looks, but yeah, I make no bones about the fact that I'm terrified of gaining my weight back. I almost died. I don't want to go through that again. And I never want to be hospitalized as an obese person again. That was without question the worst experience of my life. If I had gone into the hospital, and even with everything that I endured, the necrotizing pancreatitis, the Ogilvy syndrome, all of the stuff that I went through, if I had gone through that as a normal weighted person, it would not have been as bad. My recovery wouldn't have taken as long. I wouldn't have been as continually humiliated all of the time because there was just so many things going on. So yeah, I'm terrified of gaining my weight back 100%. That scares the shit out of me. But that is why I fast. It's for my health. Gaining the weight back, the weight is about my health. It's not just about how I look. And I don't know, maybe the pink hair or something, and you're thinking it's just a looks thing, but it most certainly is. It's definitely not. All right. Again, today I've got a couple of real humdingers left for the end. But we're not crying today. There's no crying in podcasts, not today. All right. Second last question. Here we go. Honestly, how do you even have the nerve to talk about fasting? You used to be 200 pounds heavier. What do you know about not eating? You couldn't even stop back then. Okay, Gladys. Well, clearly I did, sweetheart. Clearly I did, because you said it yourself. I used to be 200 pounds heavier. So what I know about not eating is that if you make small incremental changes to your overall diet, and you keep yourself in a consistent calorie deficit, you'll lose weight. I lost weight at a rate of about 1.55 pounds a week until I lost 201 pounds. And now it's not a problem for me. That's how I get the nerve to talk about fasting, because I lost 201 pounds that way. And then I turned right the fuck around. And when I gained some weight back, I lost 115 pounds with intermittent fasting. You want to know how I've been maintaining that loss for the last 6 years? If you guessed intermittent fasting, call the 1-800 number to claim your prize, because that's the answer. So the goal is never to stop eating. And I think I'm trying really hard to choose my words carefully and not turn into a giant snarky bee right now. It's not about stopping eating. No one should stop eating. That's not the goal, Gladys. It's learning to manage your relationship with food. It's learning to only take in the calories that my body needs so that I'm not gaining weight all the time. That's what it was about. I did learn to exert that control. I did go from eating an average of, 4,000 plus calories a day, because I was still gaining weight consistently. So I was taking in like 4,000 calories a day, taking out 1,700 now, just living my best life, having a good time. So I clearly figured it out somewhere between the 4,000 calories and the 1,700 calories. I've learned how to cope with that difference. So I think that's what gives me the nerve to talk about fasting. But agreed, it does take some nerve, especially when I have to deal with people like you. Okay, last word goes to Gladys, and this one was particularly snarky. I have no idea why I cut the list off here, but here we go. Oh, look at you, pretending to care about intermittent fasting when it's obvious you're just scared people are forgetting about you. Is this your way of staying relevant? Pathetic. I feel like she said pathetic that way. Like, she didn't spell it differently in the email, but I feel like in her mind she went pathetic. Okay. No, I'm not pretending to care about anything. I'm just telling you how I did it. I get that you think it's trendy because maybe it's trending on your feed right now, and that's how you ended up seeing my video. I'm not afraid people are forgetting about me. I don't think that many people knew about me in the first place. So if you think this is how I'm staying relevant, fine. I just keep talking. That seems to be how I'm staying relevant. I answer the questions that come in. I interact with my flamingos, and I'm having a great time. So I'm sorry that you're not enjoying it. But again, flicka flicka. You don't have to listen. You don't have to watch, and you certainly don't have to follow me. So yeah, I don't know. You're pretending to care about something. I'm not sure what it is, but I do care. I genuinely do care, because I think intermittent fasting is a terrific tool. I think learning to narrow your window can be so helpful. And when you do it gradually and sustainably, right? That's the key, because you have to be able to keep going, especially if you have a significant amount of weight to lose. You've got to be able to keep yourself going. Something like intermittent fasting can be the tool that you need to help you get those calories in control so that you stay in a deficit. That's all. I'm not trying to be pathetic. I'm just trying to be me. Part of me trying to be me is me wanting to be helpful. So, as I'm sure you already know, I've got a whack of free resources that you can find on my website, disruptingobesity.com. You can also find information about my weight loss program. You can get a copy of my guide that has been helping thousands of women all around the world to change their relationships with food. You got lots of options. I've got cookbooks. There's my weight loss workbook, Disruptor, on Amazon. I would love to help. The thing I'm most excited about right now, though, and I know I keep talking about this, and I'm going to, because it's really my baby at the moment, is my membership. I got sick of all this shit on social media. I was listening to you guys and you were telling me what you were sick of. So I came up with a solution, and I just created my own. I have my own platform now where we can talk about things privately without worrying about coworkers or family or whoever seeing our posts. There are no ads allowed. There's no algorithms or predatory marketing. There's none of that. It's just a space that I own where women are coming together to encourage and support each other through our weight loss and hold each other accountable. That's it. I'm hopping on live calls 3-4 times a week. And honestly, I'm just having the absolute time of my life doing it. So if you would like to join the Flamingo Forum, I would love to have you. There's information about all of this stuff in the show notes. Next week, I'm coming back and we're going to do the last one in our 3-part series on intermittent fasting. All of these Ask Whatevers, we're clearing space on the spreadsheet and we're going to deal with all of these Gladyses once and for all. I can't wait to see you there. In the meantime, keep trying, keep tracking, don't be intimidated, and don't give up. You've totally got this. Thank you for listening to Disrupting Obesity with Charlotte Skanes. If you know it's time to take back control, lose the weight, and keep it off, reach out to me privately with a direct message on Instagram that says ready, so you can start disrupting obesity.